Hi everybody, I am going to talk about the function and use of relationships in social casework. Human society is a network of relationships, and every human action has the characteristics of social relationship. A genuine relationship is an emotional bond between people who interact with each other. The level of interaction is determined by the strength of the bond that exists between persons who are involved in a relationship. Thus, relationship is understood as a distinctive process by which individuals are connected to one another and their personalities take shape in and through that relationship. A professional relationship is marked by an ongoing interaction between two persons. One of them is necessarily a professional and the other is a client or person with a problem who seeks help. This relationship is purposeful and governed by a set of established boundaries or limits that is deemed appropriate. The practice of social casework is a humanistic attempt to help people who have difficulty in coping with problems of relationship in family, group and society. Social casework consists of a process that is characterized by one-to-one relationship that is purposeful and aims at helping an individual in making appropriate adjustment in his or her relationships for effective personal and social functioning. At the end of this talk, you will understand the functions of professional relationship in casework practice, know the meaning and types of transference, gain an insight into the use of transference, appreciate the problems in professional relationship. Let me state the functions of professional relationship. The functions of the professional relationship are manifold. It is meant to create a conducive atmosphere for free expression of thoughts and feelings, to focus on the reality and the emotional problem, to arrive at a better solution of the person's problem, to identify the means for carrying out the planned tasks, to enhance the development of personality of the person with the problem, and to help the person to make a more acceptable adjustment to his or her personal problem. Let me outline the characteristics of caseworker and client relationship. The relationship between the caseworker and the client is vital as it has emerged out of shared and emotionally charged situations. Like any other growth-producing relationships, the relationship between the caseworker and the client contains an element of acceptance and anticipation, support and inspiration. The distinguishing mark of professional relationship is its clear purpose, which evolves out of the knowledge of the goal to be achieved. The professional relationship begins as and when the person with problem shares some part of his or her problem and the caseworker empathizes with the client and brings out his or her professional competence into the process of problem solving. This relationship may have its own therapeutic values. The relationship between the caseworker and the client is time-bound and temporary in nature. Let me describe the uses of relationship. Relationship is a channel through which the client is understood. It helps a caseworker to make the person get involved. It helps a person to relate himself or herself to the caseworker. It has its own therapeutic values. It helps a person to ventilate his or her feelings. It enhances a person's ability to make decisions. Relationship helps a caseworker to offer suggestions. It enables a person to clarify his or her doubts without fear or anxiety. Let me now discuss about transference and its types. Transference is a tendency in every human being to relate his or her emotions and attitudes with another person. It involves transferring feelings, attitudes, and fantasies from one's unconscious mind about a significant person in his or her life to another person. In the context of therapeutic intervention, transference refers to redirection of feelings of the client about a significant person to the therapist. It is a repeated manifestation of an erotic attraction towards the therapist, and this phenomenon can be seen in many forms such as rage, hatred, mistrust, gratification, extreme dependence, or even placing the therapist in equal power with the guru or godlike. Since the transference between the client and the therapist happens at the unconscious level, the psychodynamic therapists, who are often concerned with a client's unconscious material, make use of the transference to reveal any unresolved conflict that the client has with other persons from his or her childhood. In short, transference is a channel through which feelings of the person with problem are projected onto the caseworker. It has its association with the relationship the person has experienced in the past. The intensity of the person's feelings is connected to the incomplete elements of his or her life. The person may identify in the therapist the characteristics that are reminiscent of the significant others from whom he or she is transferring the emotions. Feelings can be productively explored so that the person with problem becomes aware of how these feelings are keeping an old pattern still functional in other relationships at present. The caseworker can cautiously take on a symbolic role and allow the person to work through his or her unresolved conflict. The person gains insight into how their unresolved issues lead to dysfunctional behavior. Transference is of two types, positive and negative. If the parents of the person with problem have been friendly and helpful, even though imperfectly or unsuccessfully, but with the interest of the person at heart, he or she will transfer a desire for help, friendship, guidance, emotional support, and interest. Then it is known as positive transference. During the early stages of development of the person, if the parents had not shown interest in him and were rather indifferent, then the person will transmit feelings of unfriendliness, suspicion, and distrust. It is called negative transference. If the transference is positive, help can be given more quickly and easily. When the transference is negative, then part of the work of the caseworker is to help the client understand the origin of the negative feelings and work towards turning them into positive. Let me mention the uses of transference in the therapeutic process. At the level of assessment, transference reduces the resistance from the client and helps the caseworker to initiate the process of assessment with ease. When there are emotional factors involved, the client is likely to experience strong resistances within, and therefore he or she may find self-disclosure very difficult. In such a situation, transference diminishes the resistances and enables the client to disclose freely. Transference also gives insight into client's personality, his or her strengths and weakness. On the basis of the understanding of the ego strength of the client, the caseworker prepares the intervention plan. At the level of intervention or treatment, transference enables the person with problem to think and feel more realistically. It promotes a feeling on the part of the client that his or her problem is being shared and caseworker is genuinely interested in his or her welfare. As a result, the person feels calm, relaxed, and less anxious, besides becomes open to fruitful solution. The client perceives the problem situation more realistically after becoming aware of the transference. It gives the caseworker a sense of adequacy, and the mature ego strengths of the caseworker serves to reinforce the weak ego strengths of the person with problem. In short, transference is handled in such a way that the person with problem becomes sufficiently free to think and feel more realistically about his or her behavior and relationships. The caseworker, through his or her effective way of utilizing the transference, enhances positive feelings of adequacy and confidence in the client, who is now able to mobilize his or her inner resources and make use of these resources creatively in the process of problem solving. Let me now describe the countertransference. Countertransference is viewed as a jointly created phenomenon between the therapist and the client according to the contemporary understanding. The client exerts pressures on the therapist through transference into playing a role congruent with his or her internal world. However, the specific dimensions of that role are influenced by the therapist's own personality. Consequently, the therapist gets emotionally attached with the client. Let me now discuss the important aspects of countertransference. In countertransference, feelings are aroused in the therapist or caseworker by the person with problem. Unresolved conflicts emerge due to the relationship of the past and the present feelings about that relationship. It is better for the caseworker to discuss with his or her colleague how he or she is affected by certain clients during the intervention. The caseworker should get others' perception on whether he or she is maintaining unconditional positive regard towards the client. Self-knowledge is the essential tool in dealing with countertransference. The caseworker's failure to acknowledge countertransference will make the intervention an exercise in futility and countertherapeutic. If the professional person is not prepared to deal with his or her reaction response arising out of his or her unresolved conflicts, then it is very difficult to carry on the intervention therapeutically fruitful. Countertransference in groups is indicated by exaggerated and persistent feelings that tend to recur with various persons from different groups. The training of caseworker or therapist enables the therapist or caseworker to be aware of any tendency of transference and keep it at the minimum. Nevertheless, they may never overcome such tendencies completely. If not handled properly by the therapist, the induced countertransference becomes potentially countertherapeutic. The therapist should see to it that countertransference does not affect the professional relationship. He or she should recognize the feelings and control them. In case it is unavoidable, the worker or the therapist should refer the client to some other professional. When the therapist becomes aware of counter-therapeutic inner experience, it is particularly important to choose words or phrases in his or her interactions even more carefully than at other times. Hence, caseworkers need to be alert to their own issues. Social caseworkers should be aware of their vulnerabilities derived from relationships within their family. They should be alert about triggers related to sensitive current issues such as divorce, problems with the difficult teenagers, and so on. They should avoid using prejudices and stereotypes of all kinds, including the tendency to use labels such as borderline or manipulative to describe the whole person rather than a condition or trait. They should control the urge to rescue or to foster dependency. They should not deny any pain and over-identify oneself with the pain. They should be aware of any irrational fear of anger from the clients, especially towards themselves. They should shun any urge to impose one's own agenda on the client. They should handle their frustration appropriately when the expected change is slow or not apparent. Let me discuss about the problems in professional relationship. Any profession has its own challenges. In social casework, the relationship acts as an effective tool in helping the persons with problem. But sometimes the same relationship may act as a barrier to the development of the persons with problem. Usually, we encounter some problems with reference to the client at the initial stage, such as fear about seeking help, involuntary clients, and effects of prior knowledge. Fear about seeking help. It is common knowledge among the persons with the problem that when people come for help or even situational problems, they almost always experience some anxiety. This is partly so because they are usually aware that their problems as well as the solutions lie within themselves to some extent. Conscious or unconscious feelings of shame or self-blame or recognition that one may have to make personal changes can lead to intense and realistic discomfort. Such feelings are widespread, but the intensity with which they have experienced varies according to the significance of the intervention. Involuntary clients refer to the person who has been either openly or subtly persuaded to get help. There may be anger as well as anxiety in such persons. The person may be reluctant to see a caseworker when referred for intervention, as he or she feels that the process of intervention is an intrusion on their independence or a reflection on their emotional balance. Effects of prior knowledge. The knowledge that the person has about the social casework or family therapy or psychotherapy will also affect the initial attitude. If the person has positive impressions about an agency or an individual caseworker, he or she may be willing to go for the intervention and anticipate his or her meeting with a caseworker. On the other hand, if the person had any bad experiences earlier or heard any negative report about the agency or the caseworker, he or she may be not only unwilling but also become hostile or critical or condescending towards a caseworker. Let me mention about the basic attributes which are necessary for the effectiveness of the casework or the therapy. Accurate empathy. It refers to the ability of the caseworker to perceive and communicate accurately and with sensitivity both feeling and experiences of client and their meaning and significance. The feelings of the person with problem should be sensitively handled by the caseworker. Non-possessive warmth. It refers to the caseworker's approach which should not be dominating in any way but expresses his or her respect, care and concern for the person. The caseworker exhibits warmth and interest in the person without any precondition or without any ulterior motive. Genuineness and authenticity. It denotes that a caseworker is honest in his or her approach and genuine in his or her concern for the person. Unconditional positive regard. This implies the acceptance of the client and his or her problem without any preconceived notions and beliefs in the ability of the client to solve his or her problem. Congruence. This refers to the ability of the caseworker to express clearly what he or she intends for the client. Let me mention about the worker's burnout. Burnout is a state of a person that is characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion due to excessive and prolonged stress out of his or her job. The burnout makes the worker lose interest in what he or she is doing and saps his or her energy. The worker therefore feels overwhelmed, difficult to meet the routine demands of his or her work. Eventually, he or she may feel like that there is nothing more to give. Burnout has been a subject of deep concern among social case workers for over 2 decades. When used to describe a condition experienced by direct service workers, the term can refer to such symptoms as emotional exhaustion, lack of interest in or detachment from the needs, pains, and aspirations of the person with problem. The caseworker develops a sense that his or her work has no meaning, no support, and hence feels a great deal of hopelessness. Such a state of mind often leads to low morale, absenteeism, and job turnover. Burnout has been prevalent more among social workers in the field of child welfare, community mental health, and family services. Sometimes workers no longer want to endure the pains and sorrows of their particular line of social work, be it working with people with AIDS or other terminally ill clients or abused children, among many others. If all else fails, in these instances, the caseworker may consider a job change. Let me sum up. Social casework is characterized by the relationship between the caseworker and the person with problem. Relationship is an integral factor in the process of casework practice. A professional relationship is marked by an ongoing interaction between two persons. One of them is necessarily a professional and the other is a client or person with a problem who seeks help. The relationship between the caseworker and the person with problem is vital as it has emerged out of shared and emotionally charged situations. Professional relationship has its specific functions. This relationship may have its own therapeutic values. The relationship between the caseworker and the client is time-bound and temporary in nature. Relationship in a therapeutic intervention has a degree of transference and counter-transference. Transference also gives insight into client's personality, his or her strengths and weakness. On the basis of the understanding of the ego strength of the client, the caseworker prepares the intervention or treatment plan. Counter-transference is viewed as a jointly created phenomenon between the therapist and the client. In professional relationship, the caseworkers encounter some problems with reference to the client at the initial stage, such as fear about seeking help, involuntary clients, and effects of prior knowledge. Accurate empathy, non-possessive warmth, genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and congruence on the part of the caseworker are some of the basic attributes necessary for an effective professional relationship in casework practice. Let me sign off now and hope to see you in another session. Thank you.